For decades, the regulatory framework governing the beauty industry has relied on a single, overarching credential. If you want to work in a salon, you generally have to carry this, the comprehensive cosmetology license. But look at how modern salons actually operate today. The workforce is highly segmented. You have professionals who work exclusively as lash technicians, nail artists, or shampoo stylists. They operate in highly specific lanes, completely dwarfed by the broad requirements of the general license. This creates a structural mismatch. The data indicates that this one-size-fits-all regulatory framework does not align with actual workforce behavior. To understand if the system fails the modern workforce, we must evaluate two specific metrics: labor underutilization rates and the concentration of licensing exam failures. A misaligned credentialing system forces students to spend time and money learning skills they will never use. It creates artificial barriers to entry and obscures the true economics of the labor market. To get a clear picture, we must bypass industry rhetoric and look strictly at the numbers. We will test two specific claims. Claim A is that fewer than 40% of licensed cosmetologists actively use their license in the workforce. Claim B is that approximately 70% of all licensing exam failures are concentrated strictly in the theory or written portion of the test. We will weigh these claims against federal labor statistics, state licensing board reports, and independent academic studies. If these metrics hold up to statistical scrutiny, the standard comprehensive cosmetology license requires immediate legislative and educational reform. We start with the total pool of professionals. According to the Professional Beauty Association, there are over 1.3 million licensed cosmetology professionals in the United States. This chart compares that total universe of licenses against federal employment data. On the left is the 1.3 million licenses. On the right, the Bureau of Labor Statistics data from May 2023 counts only about 294,000 actively employed hairdressers, hairstylists, and cosmetologists. Even if we expand that BLS estimate to include related fields like estheticians, manicurists, and makeup artists, the combined actively employed workforce reaches approximately 900,000. It still falls significantly short of the total licenses. Using this most generous employment estimate against the 1.3 million total licenses implies a massive workforce utilization gap. Roughly 30 to 40% of licensed professionals are not working in the field at any given time. This macro-level scale mismatch directionally supports the claim that there is severe underutilization of the credential on a national scale. But national employment counts are broad. They show us that a gap exists, but to understand exactly how these licenses are being underutilized, we have to look at granular, state-level survey data. In January 2025, Utah's Office of Professional Licensure Review, or OPLR, produced the most detailed survey-based state data available on cosmetology license utilization. This table breaks down the OPLR's key findings by the percentage of active Utah licensees compared to hours worked per week. Look at the top row. 32% report working 0 hours. When you group the lowest brackets together, the report explicitly states that 72% of licensees currently work 20 hours or less a week. Now check the bottom row. Only 17% of active licensees report working more than 30 hours per week, which is the traditional threshold for full-time work. Several evidence-based factors explain this drop-off. First is the high entry cost. Average private cosmetology school costs exceed $16,000 to $20,000, creating debt burdens that deter sustained practice. Second, the median annual wage for cosmetologists sits between $33,000 and $35,000, making full-time practice financially challenging for many graduates. Third, the work is inherently supplemental. The OPLR noted that cosmetology is most often a part-time source of income rather than a primary career. The combination of federal shortfalls and direct state survey data strongly supports Claim A. Far fewer than 40%, and realistically closer to 17%, of active licensees use the credential as a full-time career. If the license is underutilized in the workforce, we have to examine the barrier to entry itself, the licensing exam. The most authoritative comparative data on cosmetology exam pass rates comes from a 2016 study by the American Institutes for Research, using National Interstate Council, or NIC, data. This graphic shows the national mean pass rates for the two sections of the exam. The written theory portion has a pass rate of 85%. The hands-on practical portion has a significantly higher pass rate of 93.7%. Research identifies a specific structural reason for this gap: rater leniency. Expert evaluators in face-to-face practical exams tend to grade more generously, making the practical exam artificially easier. This pushes the burden of failure onto the written exam. And within that written exam, industry data points to one specific domain as the top cause of failure. That domain is scientific concepts. It covers chemistry, anatomy, electricity, and infection control, and it carries 35% of the total exam weight. Because practical grading is lenient, the regulatory system inadvertently concentrates failure onto an objective, computer-scored test of scientific theory. While no single published report uses the exact headline that 70% of failures are on theory, we can calculate that figure directly using the NIC pass rate baseline. Here is how that math works. Assume a baseline cohort of 100 candidates taking both sections of the exam. Based on the 85% pass rate, exactly 15 of those candidates will fail the theory portion. Based on the 93.7% pass rate, 6.3 candidates will fail the practical portion. This gives us a total universe of 21.3 failing candidates across any section. To find the share of total failures that occur strictly on the written test, we divide the 15 theory failures by the combined total of 21.3. That equation gives us exactly 70.4%. The math directly supports Claim B. Out of all exam failures nationally, over 2/3 are concentrated on a written theory portion that emphasizes topics where spool preparation is historically the weakest. When we place the workforce data next to the exam data, a clear systemic bottleneck emerges. Students are taking on significant debt and struggling to pass an exam heavily weighted toward broad scientific concepts, all to obtain a comprehensive license that the vast majority will never use for full-time employment. Which brings us back to the current regulatory framework. The modern beauty industry is no longer one single career model. Treating it as such creates unnecessary failure and debt. A functional regulatory framework must balance public protection with actual workforce alignment. Students deserve shorter, smarter, and highly specific license types. Education and credentialing should honestly match the specialized careers they actually intend to pursue.